Welcome to today's session where we are going to be talking about integrating technology into your regular day. So my name is Cassie Nowak. I've been a math teacher my entire educational career, most recently as an instructional specialist. And I also love technology. So today I'm really excited because not only do I get to share with you my love for technology, but I get to do it under my area of expertise, which is math. So I'm looking forward to kind of sharing with you. And at the end, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them or as we go. So today our objective is going to be to discover ways we can use Google Slides to overcome the different shortcomings of your ORGO curriculum. And as we do that, we will increase student learning. So today we're going to discuss your ORGO curriculum. We're going to talk about different ways that you can use technology in your classroom. We are going to discuss the SAMR model of integration, and then we're going to look at several different examples of using Google Slides in order to meet the needs of your students. So first off, let's talk a little bit about ORGO. I was not very familiar with this curriculum until I talked with some of you about the strengths and weaknesses of the curriculum and what you like and what you don't like. There were tons of things that you guys loved about the ORGO, but there was also some complaints that I heard over and over again, including that the curriculum requires too much printing, and not only does it require it, but you were also getting memos about paper conservation and making sure you're not printing too much. So that's kind of stressful in itself. Also, I heard that the activities aren't very fun or engaging for students sometimes, that the activities don't really have the rigor that you'd like, and that perhaps that's because the curriculum comes from Australia and not Texas. Also, there's not a lot of chances for students to work together or to use a more hands-on approach to create their understanding of the different math skills. So whenever I was thinking about this workshop and thinking about what you'd like to do with technology, I tried to take those concepts as I was thinking about it, things that we can overcome through technology just to make your curriculum a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit more impactful for you. So thinking about technology, there's lots of different ways you can use technology to make your classroom a better learning environment. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can use technology. One way is just to clarify your lesson. So this is really important because it is a way that you can learn to replicate yourself. So you can video yourself or screencast yourself teaching a lesson or doing an example. You can repeat directions or maybe discuss a rubric so that when students have questions, instead of you having to face-to-face and talk to them about those questions, they have a place to go and they can see those again or learn those if they were absent or whatever. Another way that technology can be used is to have a platform for a student to be able to dig a little deeper. Sometimes you're going to notice that there are certain kids that just have a passion or an interest for a certain subject. So having the technology readily available makes it easier for them to satisfy their own curiosities. Also, technology can help you facilitate collaborative learning, and it makes it easier to facilitate the collaborative learning. Another thing that I love about using technology is it frees you up as the teacher. So a minute ago we talked about using screencasts to reteach, and doing things like that help you to have more time available without interruption in order to meet the needs of specific groups of students. Okay, so speaking of that, technology can also help you differentiate for each student. And we're going to look a little bit about how you can do that. Also, you can have digital manipulatives that will help you to give your students the chance to have a more hands-on approach to creating their own understanding as they are learning their different math skills. But probably most important, using technology is the perfect platform for your students to have a chance to develop the 21st century skills that we know are very important to them in this day and age. So a chance for students to collaborate, a chance for them to communicate what they've learned, a chance for them to connect real world with the things they're learning. So using technology is the way that students can really hone their 21st century skills. So before we look at some examples of technology being used in a math classroom, let's talk about how technology should be integrated into your lessons. So think about technology, think about your lesson being delivered in a technology-free area, perhaps, and the way a classroom was 25 years ago. And then think about that as being the way to teach in the lesson. And now we're going to compare it to how you can use technology to improve that. So there is a model called the SAMR, Technology Integration Model, and it is just a way to think about how technology is really impacting your lesson. So the S stands for substitution, and this is the integration level where you're basically just substituting a non-technology activity for a technology activity. So it's a direct substitution. There's no real change in the outcome. There's very little change in the lesson itself. It does have its place and it is important. So think about how we would communicate before we had email. We would either send a fax, or before that we would even just write a letter and have it delivered through the mail. So now with the invention of email, even though it is a direct substitution, the use of the technology makes us able to complete so much more. So sometimes substitution doesn't seem very high level, but it does allow for a student or a teacher to be freed up in the time department. So substitution is a very valid way to integrate technology into your classroom. The second one is the A, and it stands for augmentation. And this is a little bit more of a change than just substitution. So it is still a substitution, but there are some changes that do enhance the lesson. So when you think about the substitution and the augmentation, both of these integrations of technology just enhance the lesson. So now let's look at the second half. The M stands for modification, and this is where technology allows for a significant redesign of the lesson. It transforms the lesson in some kind of way. It makes it more fun, more engaging, more impactful, more of something. There is a significant change. And the last one is redefinition. And redefinition is sort of the pinnacle of integrating technology. It allows for tasks that were once impossible to now be practical in the classroom. It transforms not just the learning, but it transforms the complete classroom. And so as we look at the M and the R, these are the types of integration that really will transform the learning that's going on in the classroom. And if we were to compare them to Bloom's, the S and the A, they would be more alike the lower levels of Bloom. And as you move up, the M and the R are what are going to have the greatest learning impact on students. So we've talked about the ORGO curriculum. We've talked about ways that you can use technology to bridge the gaps that you guys have seen in the curriculum, things that you want changed about the curriculum. And so now we're just going to look at some examples of ways that we are using Google Slides. And the reason I'm focusing all of these examples on Google Slides is because I've also heard from you guys that you don't have a lot of technology that you have access to, but you do have Google Apps. And I found that Google Slides is one of the most versatile programs because you can use it in so many ways. So we're going to look at some of the ways to use these and some examples, and we're going to talk about those and kind of get your thoughts and ideas on each one. So in order to get your thoughts and ideas, I'd like for you to type this link into your browser so that you can access the slides where we're going to keep our thoughts. So after each example, we're going to take a few seconds to answer a question or two so that we can all share and learn from each other. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at are some digital flashcards. And a paperless quiz. Okay, so here we have some digital flashcards, and you see they're just multiplication flashcards. There are some slight variation of a regular flashcards, and that is that you have different levels. So this one says 3 seconds, 2 seconds, and 1 second. So you can see that when students use these flashcards, they're going to be kept automatically on a certain time schedule. So they have 3 seconds on this first level before the answer pops up, and they can decide whether they were right or wrong. This also has some benefits over regular paper flashcards because you can differentiate really easily. So if you have one of these digital flashcards for each of the fact families, you can just literally assign or have kids choose the fact family that they're working on. Another way that you can take something old school and kind of add some technology to it is just with quizzes or worksheets. So you can see this is just a regular quiz, but here we've added a shape where the kid can drag it to highlight their correct answer. So those are 2 examples where technology is being used on a very traditional teaching method. So let's go to slide 1 on our thoughts. And what you're going to do is everyone's going to just click a different cell. We all have editing rights, so everybody can type at the same time. So just click one of the cells, and then you're going to answer the question, what level of technology integration do you think the activities, the flashcards and the quiz are, and why? All right, and then we'll share, after we're done, we'll just share them with each other. Okay, so going back, we're going to look at the next example, and this example is for much younger, pre-K or kindergarten students, and you'll notice that there is some directions, and there are a bunch of different slides that are all pretty similar. But here we have the first one, and so let's go to one that's not been done. So this one, we're going to be identifying the digit 1. So for this activity, the little students would just find all the ones and put a bubble gum on them. Okay, so this is similar to something you might have in a math station. Maybe you had something like this that you laminated and students colored in all the ones with a dry erase marker, or maybe it's something similar to a worksheet that you've had where kids use like a bingo marker and dab all of the ones. So I've seen this same type of activity in different formats. So what we're going to do is talk about this format using this digital learning. And let's go back to our thoughts sheet, and on cell 2, on slide 2, I'm sorry, choose a cell. And I want you to think about how do you think that this application of technology, so what we just did, how is that beneficial to students, and then how is it beneficial to teachers? Okay, and then we'll share our ideas. So beneficial to students, it is engaging, it's fun, it's colorful, they can work together, plus just using a computer can be engaging for students. For teachers, it's beneficial because you do not have to take the time to print, cut, laminate, find dry erase markers. It really cuts down on the time that's required to implement an activity like that if you were doing a math station paper pen type of an activity. Okay, so let's look at the next activity. So I'm going to open them up. Okay, so here we have an activity that you can see is very colorful just on opening it. It is Skeeball, so it's taking the place of a game. And so basically it has all the directions and everything the students need, and then they get to start working on their own problems. Now this is a very typical problem that we see across many grade levels where students are learning the place value system and how to take a standard form and convert it to a Word form or expanded form or so forth. But in this activity, it is much more fun than a regular worksheet because now it seems like a game. Additionally, when you take something like this, you can very easily modify it to differentiate for your students. So you can see here that this game goes up to the 100 millionths place, but if we have a different version, we can see here that it looks very similar, but this one only goes up to the 100,000ths place. So it's easy to take something like this and use it to differentiate for your students without your students really feeling like they're doing something totally different. So let's go back to our thoughts sheet on slide 3 now. We're going to add our thoughts in on how you could use technology to differentiate for your students. So think about your ORGO curriculum. Think about the different areas of the resources that it provides. I know that it does have a whole section that is direct for differentiation for average, below, and above. So think about how could you take that and use technology to enhance it either for the students or for you. So take a second to talk about that and to write your thoughts. All right, so let's look at another set of examples. This is another great thing about Google Slides. You can force your students to always make a copy, and you just do that by giving them the special link that forces them to make a copy. Okay, so here we have one activity that's ordering decimals. So it does have instructions, and then here we have the activity. It's automatically more engaging because there is a design. In fact, when this activity was made, the cactus was becoming really popular, and so that's why the cactus became the background. Also, it is interactive, so the students get to move, and if they change their mind, so for example, if they are putting them in order and they change their mind, they can move it around just like that. I'm going to do a different example because that one was already finished. Notice that this one is a little bit more rigorous because not all of the activities, not all of the question cards go to the same place value. But for this example, once you get them in order, the directions tell you to ungroup them, and then once you drag it away, it will let the student know whether they're right or wrong. So this activity is self-checking. Here's another example of an activity that's self-checking. It says read the number and highlight all the ways it can be represented. So the number 71/100ths. So 71/100ths could look like that. It could not look like that, but it could look like this. And so once the students have finished their work, they can automatically check to see if it's right. And here you can see red and red, so they got this problem right. So using technology has an added benefit of letting you as the teacher provide a way for students to self-assess along the way. So it is just not very practical or realistic to think that you can go around and check all of your students' work on every problem as they go. In this way, students can catch their own mistakes, or they can determine once there is a disconnect and they need maybe a question answered. And then, so having activities that are self-checking is a great way to increase the learning in your class, help students to become more independent in their learning, and free up some of your time. So let's go back to our thought sheet and talk a little bit about this. So on slide 4, you're going to talk about when would you like your students to be able to check their own work and why. So think about your curriculum. Think about the activities that you typically use for each module and each lesson. Where would be a good place for them to be able to self-assess and why? So write your thoughts down, and then we'll take a few minutes and discuss them. Okay, so now let's look at a couple of more. examples. Oops. Okay, so here we have a activity called Angles Around Town, and this notice has some reteach information, so students can check out some vocabulary words. If they don't remember how to use a protractor to measure angles, it has all of the directions there, and then it gives them a chance to try. So what's interesting and useful about this activity is that there is an actual movable protractor that they have to manipulate in order to solve the problems. So here technology is helping to solve the problem of hands-on materials, tools, and manipulatives. So not every teacher has access to all of the manipulatives or tools that they'd like to have. So for in this example, she may not have 20 protractors for all of her students to have one. So she's either stuck having to make kids wait their turn or to work in large groups where they don't get as much hands-on practice as if they had their own. So in this case, technology can help provide students with hands-on materials to offer a more concrete learning. This is another example of that. In this example, students are learning how to compose and decompose fractions. So here we have a whole that's broken into fifths, and then we can see that there are fifths there. And then specifically, this TEK is about showing as the sum of unit fractions. So for this example, what students are doing is they're taking the whole and they're breaking it up into unit fractions that they're labeling. So this would be a fifth. And then they're showing it as the sum of unit fractions. So as they do all of this, 1/5 plus 1/5 all the way, they'll notice that equals 1 whole. So again, here's another example where students are able to have more hands-on. So in this case, the teacher didn't have to purchase fraction bars or fraction pieces. The students didn't have to spend a lot of time cutting paper fraction pieces apart. It just kind of makes the time used more wisely. So let's go back to our thought sheet on slide 5. Let's see. Slide 5. What are some ways that you can envision adding engagement to your ORGO lessons? So think about the things that you teach and the activities that maybe you don't feel are very hands-on. What could you do what could you do with technology in order to kind of bridge that gap? All right, we're going to look at 3 more, and we're getting, if you've noticed, we've kind of started at the lower level of technology integration with the substitution and the augmentation, and as we're going, we're kind of moving up. So the very first ones we saw were very substitution based, like the flashcards or the paperless quiz. Then we started doing augmentation by making it really engaging with cute pictures and colorful designs. As we were moving into modification, we started thinking about what are some ways that we can do things that maybe we couldn't do without technology, like making something self-checking. And now we're going to kind of start moving into the higher level activities, which would be higher levels of blooms and more meaningful levels of technology integration. So the next one I'm going to show you is kind of in the middle, maybe between augmentation and modification. Here we have an activity that you can see is basically just having students practice multiplication problems. But now we're able to use technology to make it more fun. So this is an escape room type class, type activity. So they're going to use the clues to figure out the password. And so how they play this game is they have to solve it and then think, what can I do with this? And hopefully they'll realize that they're going to create a code and so forth. When they get their code, they will go to another piece of Google software, enter in their code, and if it's right, it'll take them to level 2. So now we're using technology to really do something really engaging and fun that the students enjoy, but we're able to do it without a ton of resources. We're able to do all of the passwords and locks through technology instead of actually having physical locks. Okay, so let's see. We're gonna just go on to the next one and look at the movie marathon. So this was one of my favorite projects that I ever did while I was teaching 4th grade math, and we used to do it paper-based. And so I would have to have a copy of all the different movies that the students can watch, a copy of the directions, a whole bunch of copies and everything for the students to do it. So I was able to change it over to digital. I just have the movies and the show times here instead of everyone having their own little catalog, the directions and so forth. And this makes for a really great activity that is based on the 4th grade skill that we're learning of elapsed time, but it includes a real world connection, which is something really important. So with your ORGO curriculum, there isn't a lot of real world integration. So what you can do is supplement the curriculum with activities like this that you can have and assign really easily through either just a link or through Google Classroom. All right, so let's go back to our thoughts. We're getting close to the end of our examples. But on number 6, let's think of what are some real world connections that you could use technology to facilitate in your classroom. So think about the things you teach, your units and your lessons, and think about how you can connect that. For example, if you are teaching place value, you could think about lottery tickets, and kids could look up lottery ticket winners and do things with those numbers. So what do you think are some things you could do in your classroom? Okay, so we are at the end of our examples, but I did want to show you one more big example of actual redefinition of the learning environment that can take place using technology, and specifically using slides, Google Slides, something that we all have and that y'all have for free, and we can use that to really help students learn in a different way. So a complete redefinition of what the learning looks like compared to what we would have seen before technology integration. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is called a learning path. And basically all it is a set of slides that the students are going to work through. Having the activities set up in this way helps for the students to be more independent as they're learning, so that these students are able to work at their own pace. When a student is worked through the entire learning path, then they are ready for the next learning path. So let's look and see how this would work. Basically, once a student was ready for the skill, they would get access to this set of slides. It tells them right on the front that your job is to learn 4th grade measures, specifically finding out how much time has passed. Okay, and now on each slide is kind of a different activity for the students to do. So the first thing they're going to do is watch a video. And I talked earlier about how one of the important things about technology is the ability to replicate the teacher. So if you have students working on their own pace, or if you're a teacher that is working with small groups for a majority of the day, it becomes really important to actually have videos recorded and ready to go for students to learn when they're ready to learn that. So here they would just click on the link. It would take them to the video that they're going to watch, and they're going to use this video to learn about how to find elapsed time using the mountain method. So let's say the other thing that you can do is communicate on the slide. So here I have this little icon that shows 2 people, and the students know that when they see this icon, they're to work together with a learning partner so that they can collaborate and learn together. So they've watched the video. The next thing they're going to do is go to Quizlet and learn the words. So they're going to go learn some vocabulary words. It is lower level application, but it's important to start the lesson with that so that students have foundations that they need to be successful. We can also use technology just to hold students accountable to showing their work. So what we would have them do is click to take the quiz and learn the vocabulary words, and then once they had their score posted on the program, they would just screenshot it and then paste it right here on the slide. So when I would come back, I would see their score and know that they did their work. You can use it for other things, like here it's just for them to copy this into the notebook. So it's still important to communicate ideas and material that you don't have as much opportunity when you're not having as many big whole group lessons. So maybe as I'm having a whole group lesson, this would be something that would be important for me to share, like warn the students, this is always what happens. So I'm able to use technology in this way just to communicate something quick and easy and point it out to the students to be careful about this. And then as the slides go on, we actually would just link to different activities they could do. The kids had to make a copy. This activity allowed them to use what they learned from the video previously. And there are some reiteration of directions and of how you actually do it. And then the kids have a chance to do it themselves in an interactive way where they're able to drag and label and do the work in a more fun, hands-on way. So after they did that, basically you can see we're working through the Bloom's levels too, and the technology is what is being used in order to facilitate this. And as they're working through, they're moving up to greater levels of Bloom's. Here they're going to do that, that movie marathon that I talked about a few minutes ago. But also, you can use the technology in conjunction with the resources that you already have. So I just communicated using this that now they're just going to go get their paper math book and they're going to do that page. And then so as it goes along, and notice too that the icon changes. So now they're releasing some of their dependence on their learning partners and working together with themselves. So the very last thing I always do, some kind of extension, create a menu for the movie theater, write some story problems. So using this Google slide made it to where I could deliver directions and help to every student so that they could independently work through the learning. So let's go back one more time to our thoughts and go to the last slide. And let's talk about, I showed you some very basic technology integration, like from the very first thing I showed you where we have a quiz copied and pasted onto a slide with a movable circle that kids can mark their answer. So that would be kind of like the most basic substitution of technology integration. And I showed you the complete opposite end of the spectrum where you can use technology to facilitate a completely student-driven student self-paced classroom. So what I want you to do is think about some ideas that you're having, and what I want you to really focus on is what are the first steps that you're going to take using technology. So think about your ORGO curriculum, all of the complaints that you had about it, like not being able to print paper, not having fun and engaging activities for students to do. Everything looks the same and is kind of boring. So think about all of the drawbacks to your really great curriculum and think about how you can use technology to overcome all those drawbacks. So pick a cell, and in the cell I want you to say what are some of the first steps that you're going to use Google Slides, something that you have and know well. How can you use that as a tool for technology integration? So kind of that's what we've had today to talk about, integrating technology, overcoming the shortcomings, overcoming just the shortcomings that you have in your curriculum. And I loved kind of sharing with you some of my thoughts and ideas and my experiences I've had in the past. And I'd love to answer any questions you had. You're more than welcome to email me at cassienowak@gmail.com or ask me any questions. Thank you for your attention.